everyone, Greg Olson with the Jasper County Conservation Department, and today we are joined by Andy Stone, who is a former 6th grade teacher from Newton and serves on the Jasper County Board. Today he's going to share with us his tomato towers. So he likes to grow indeterminate tomatoes in his garden. He's an avid gardener, so we're going to go through some of the materials and how it's made, and we will get back with you here in a second.
Hi there. What happened was I began growing indeterminate tomatoes, which means that they don't quit growing until frost. And if you put them on a regular 3 or 4 foot tall tower, they grow out the top and across the garden, and I guess you can prune them, but they only produce on the ends of it. So what I kept trying to do was find a taller and taller tower, and you can't find a tower that's any more than maybe 5 or 6 feet. So I began to make these 7-foot towers. This is the beginning of it right here, and what I have started to do is make them out of cedar, although the first ones I just used pine. And essentially I just ripped down to about a 1 by 1, and then I have a cross piece. And then I put in some kind of a brace at the corners, and what that does is it makes it light and fairly strong. Well, I'll show you in a few minutes that they go into a kind of a triangular shape like a prism, and that gives you that bit of stability too. And then you can let these things grow, and they'll grow away clear the top and actually out the top and start back down, but this way you don't have a terrible mess in your garden with them just growing everywhere. And we've had pretty good production with them, but when you're growing heirloom varieties, some of them do good and some of them don't. Some of them do good one year and some of them do good the next year. But the nice thing is you can always save your seed, because since they're not hybrids, they will breed true if you save the seeds.
So Andy, is this a plan that you came up with yourself, or is this an idea that you saw somewhere and kind of tweaked, or how did that come about?
Well, there is no such thing as anything original in my life. So I saw something in a gardening magazine, but they were only about 5 feet tall, and they were only maybe 2 feet wide. And I just thought, well, if they're that big, I can make them a little bigger. And I tried once making them 8 feet tall, but then you can't reach up to tie them up, because tomatoes don't actually vine and hang on to anything. You have to keep tying them up all summer. It's pretty labor intensive, but it's therapy, and you get tomatoes out of it. So
All right, so we're going to kind of go through the process of how he gets his materials laid out and how we construct the towers.
Okay, what I'm trying to do is since the materials are quite light, is trying to keep everything really strong with as many triangles as I can. And what I'll do is I will put and you're not going to build these casually, because if you're using cedar and if you're using deck screws, you've got quite a bit of money in it. But I've found that I can keep the towers in pretty good shape for 5 or 6 years, and maybe longer now that I'm using cedar. But what I'm going to do is I would put a screw through there at that spot, and then what I'm going to do is, since I'm not what you'd ever call any kind of really good carpenter, I use this little clamp, and I get my joint set where I want it, and then since it's held there, it's pretty forgiving as far as trying to put things together. And then once I have that screw through there, I can put these little triangular braces on, and what I will do is I will just simply start And yes, that means I have to put in, have to do a pilot for every screw. And when I'm actually in production, I guess, I use 2 drills, so I'm not having to change everything all the time. But once you've got this in here, then you can put your little deck screw, and it will tighten itself up. And then you'll put another one here, and on the lower cross pieces, I only put 1 on each corner. In the middle one, I'll put 2 and 2, and then just 2 up at the top. Okay, what I've done here is started a few of the heirloom tomatoes. Because the plant sale that I usually take plants to is canceled this year, I'm only growing 1 flat. But there are 9 different varieties here. And so I've got 4 individual plants for each variety, which will be plenty for me and maybe give a few away or whatever. I can't exactly tell you which ones are which right now, because I've got them labeled with a number or with a letter, and then each letter stands for, you know, a different one. But there's one called a Federal, there's one called a Hungarian Heart, there's one called Italian Heirloom, there's one called Sheboygan, there's one called Trucker's Favorite, there's a new one this year I'm trying, Eva Bell or something like that, and there's one that's gold medal something or other. Because they are heirlooms, in many cases they're incredibly specific to a site, and they may do well where they're developed, where somebody saved the seeds generation after generation, and then they may not do so well for me. So I try some tried and true, and then I do a couple of new ones every year to see maybe what I can add to this. The Federal is an interesting one. It's sort of flat, looks like a pepper, but it's one of those paste tomatoes. It's like a Roma or an Amish paste, except it's got really, really good flavor and hardly any juice. You can make salsa out of that, and you don't make much mess. There's just about enough juice left for maybe 1 Bloody Mary afterwards. So it works out real good. My grow box here has grown from something that I could put 2 flats in to I can get 6 flats if I turn them if I turn them this way. But of course this year I only need 1 flat, so I kind of got all this wasted space. The grow lights, I used to use old fluorescent lights, and they're not so good. These are pretty good. They're little LED full spectrum lights, and I just yesterday thought, well, I might as well move 1 more, so I've got 3 lights over the flat. There's a little heater on that end. Somebody asked me if I do all my cords according to electrical code, and the code is if it works when I plug it in, then that's code. It's pretty temporary, so I wouldn't recommend doing it this way for anybody, but it works for me. Always a problem is getting enough light, and the other thing is keeping them from getting too long and stringy, where you have to stake them up. These are starting to flop a little bit, but the big thing is you've got to keep the temperature actually lower than you think. I talked to one of the local growers, and he said he spends more money keeping his greenhouse cool than he does trying to keep it hot, because as soon as the sun comes out he has to ventilate and try to keep it in the 60s. So I actually have a tiny little heater at the one end with a fan, and actually new this year is I've got a sensor here that across the barn tells me what the temperature in the barn is and what the temperature in the box is. So, you know, and that I didn't buy specifically for this. I bought it for indoors, but it didn't work very well, so it's in here and seems to work just fine. Most of my seed I get from Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. And they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 or 3,000 different tomato seeds that they work with. Now, a few of them make them into their catalog, and even if I'm saving the seeds, I usually buy new seeds from them, so I have both, partly because that way I figure I'm supporting them. They are the largest private seed-saving organization in the United States. They're not as big as the government and some of the operations that are out of the land-grant colleges, but it's a huge, huge operation. Thousands and thousands of different kinds of seeds. And I buy seeds from them, and then I also save seeds from generation to generation. And saving seeds, there's a lot of ways you can do that. I used to try, I just lay the seeds out on a paper towel. Well then, they stick to the paper towel, and every seed has its own little piece of paper towel because, you know, it's stuck to it. Well then, I found out that all you have to do is just put your seeds in a jar of water, leave them there for about 3 days, and every so often give it a shake, and then just run it through a sieve or a colander, and all that jelly has fermented off them, and you've got nice dry seeds. You still have to lay them out and let them dry a little bit, and you need to put them in something that they don't. Plastic bags aren't so good because they'll get too much humidity in them. So a regular paper envelope, and then it helps if you put them someplace where there's not too many mice coming through, because that's a problem here and saving the seed is that, oh look, little tiny energy packets of food, and I'll just eat that. And so, you know, you do have to, I actually often have traps that I have to set here because I find that mice will get in and pretty soon I've got nothing but little stubs, so, you know. This is more or less a finished product. This is one that's been in service for quite a few years. If you were to look carefully at the bottom, you'd see that it's starting to rot pretty good. Even cedar will do that. I've also changed how I do these joints. This is what I would say is the worst possible way to do it out of masonite. I'm just having to basically replace those as I go. The whole thing, what I'll do is I'll put a electric fence post at each edge, each corner, and drive it down the ground and then tie it to that. And that gives it pretty good stability. If you don't do that, pretty soon the vines just pull it over. And then of course what you have to do, and this becomes the really labor-intensive part of this, is that I'll run a string from the bottom here, up around here, up to here, and maybe 2 or 3 strings across there. And then as you go, you just tie up your, you know, you see a branch that's got 2 or 3 tomatoes on it, well, you know that's going to just tear off, so you have to tie that back to it. But this will grow clear up. In fact, the mistake on this one is that the top piece should be about here. The nice thing about this one is that it's together with hinges, so it folds down flat, and that's kind of easy to that's easier to store and to handle once it's dropped down together. But being incredibly cheap, I didn't want to have to buy any hinges because that's kind of expensive, so I was just using any old hinge I could find. And eventually I got to the point where this is a brand new one. This one I just made this year, and the 3 sides are just like this. And you just simply set it up and tie it together at the joints. So here, I'll hold that for you. So once you have this out in the garden where you want it, then you just tie it together, and it's every bit as stable as anything that had a hinge or anything else. And you know, you don't have to look very far in this to find places that it splits, even if you're drilling your holes. But for the most part, I would expect this to last quite a long time. You know, you have to have a lower cross piece to get the plant tight against it early, and then this way I can go up this high and I can tie things off to the sides, and I'll still, in a good year, the plant will grow up, come up, and it'll just flop down. Now what I'll do is I'll put one plant on each of the 3 sides on the outside. And that way everybody seems to have enough space. I think if you did it in a square, it probably could be just as steady and just as strong, but this way they all have a certain amount of light and a certain amount of space that they can work with. Sometimes I'll bury a piece of PVC pipe by each one so that I can water them without splattering the plants. You want to kind of trim your plants so there's air moving through there, because you've got quite a lot of vegetation here, and you will get blight. And once that starts, you might as well cut it off, because it's never going to quit. It's just going to follow up, and you'll have 2 leaves at the top, and that's about all you'll have.
Did you mention how long you estimate these to last?
I'm going to say these cedar ones, I don't know for sure, but this one I think is, the old one there is pine, and it's been used for 5 or 6 years.
Sure.
So I'm expecting these cedar ones to last double that, maybe.
Right.
Probably longer than I'll live.
Yep. And give everyone an estimate on how much they will spend on building.
I'm going to guess that you're going to spend about $25 on this. I buy cedar 2x4s, which is about as cheap a cedar as you can find, and then I just rip them down to a 1x1. The 2x4s actually seem to be cheaper than buying a 1x piece. I don't know exactly why that is, but I can always get the 2x4s, and then you also have all these little tiny strips that are left over off the edges that you can make all kinds of things with. You got stakes for your tomato plants. I've built trellises, all kinds of things out of the strips. So there's not much waste except sawdust.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy. It was awesome that you could share this project with us, and hopefully you guys are excited for getting a garden planted this year, and maybe this will be a project that you can add to your list for this coming season. So thanks again,
All right,
and
sure.
we'll see you next time.